Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad speaking, and today I wanted to talk to you about a really interesting initiative or ICO, and it's called AION. It's obviously a company that is forging ahead or part of a company, and I really wanted to talk to you about what it is, the strengths of it, the weaknesses of it, the opportunities, and the threats. So in one encapsulate, we call that the SWOT analysis, and by itemizing each of those points, we can get a good understanding of exactly what this is. So let's get into it, guys. I'm going to be looking at AION today. The first thing I want to do is go ahead and provide you with an insight into essentially what this company is about. So what I thought I'd do is I'll play you a little bit of a video of the presentation from the AION company, and I'll talk you through a little bit about exactly what they are about. Okay, so essentially, guys, from the notes I've taken having watched the video, the idea is they want you to imagine if you could solve the issue of blockchains working in isolation. And that's exactly what AION are trying to do. You would have heard of other companies like ARC or OneChain or ICON Foundation or even the Neo/on-chain dual operational modality. But basically, guys, it's important to recognize that there was an origin called the Generation 1 blockchain, and essentially the functionality of the original blockchain you can see here was to establish a peer-to-peer network. It was a store of value mechanism, and it was really important because it was the foundation and the bedrock for subsequent blockchains. In this diagram you can now see with the Ethereum symbol, that was the second generation, guys, and that was all about building the dApps, about having that capacity to have smart contracts built upon a particular blockchain, and that's what separated that from its original Bitcoin model, the Satoshian one. The other thing I want to talk to you today, guys, about is what we call the third generation blockchain, and that's what underpins AION. And that's why this is so important. In the third generation blockchain, we're talking about things that reference cross-chain capacity. I've coined them things like hub chains or super chains or hyper chains even, or perhaps, for want of a better word, interchain. But essentially the function, as you can see in this diagram, is about bridging a hub blockchain with a multitude or an infinite number of other blockchains. So it's not about trying to append smart contracts as generation 2, but it's actually trying to interconnect the overall blockchain ecosystem together via techniques called bridging or portal structures, and AION is one of these particular generation 3 models. So we're going to be looking at that in detail today and asking the question, what if we could unify these blockchain technologies into one robust ecosystem? So what would that mean, guys? What would it mean if you had an architecture, and why would it be valuable? If you had an architecture that could essentially bring together all the blockchains in one robust ecosystem, what would that mean in terms of the value of the token that could do that? What would it mean in terms of the resources and the design of that particular company? Well, currently there are hundreds, if not thousands, of blockchains out there. But just imagine if just one could interconnect with all of them. That's what this AION company is striving to achieve in 2017, and it's trying to establish itself as what's called an IBN, which stands for Interoperable Blockchain Network. So in the future we may even know the present-day internet as an IBN system. So the imperative is essentially that interoperability, and that's going to be the buzzword that you're going to hear a lot of today, and the applications for such an ecosystem are going to be dependent upon its interoperability. So in terms of the benefits, there's a lot in there, guys, and I'll stop the video there and just say, if you want to know more, there's this website called the AION website, and you can go in and you can not only read the very, very comprehensive white paper, but you can go and listen to how Ethereum is going to be working in sync with this particular project. It's really exciting, but I will allude to that in a moment, so you won't miss a thing. Okay, so going on with some of the other strengths as our main focus. What I wanted to do is focus on a key aspect of the white paper, and that white paper is just simply trying to illuminate a little bit more about the third tier, that third generation. So here, guys, as you can see, it goes through and it talks about the first generation, the second generation, and the third generation blockchain. We want to focus on the third generation as a strength because it stems from a lot of experience and a lot of protocol knowledge that's been the precepts in those previous stages. So essentially, the design of this third generation is to act as a hub, and typically from all the different white papers I've read of like systems, there's a central mechanism and a central protocol, and that is asserted as a unique blockchain structure. And in AION's case, it's called the AION-1. And you can see in this diagram here, guys, there's a central component, and from that it stems out into via what is known as bridging. And there's bridging capacities built in so that it can interconnect and hyperconnect with other blockchains. Those blockchains, guys, can actually function independently, and they can govern to a degree on their own, and they can be private or public in nature. So what makes this such an exciting technology is that it can essentially create a web. You know, it can create a hyperconnected environment in which there's a strong interaction and transaction, and there's fluidity, and there's an infinite growth within the blockchain sphere. So very exciting in terms of its capacity, and if you want to read the white paper, it goes into a lot of information about the protocol itself, about the consensus mechanisms, and so forth. But obviously, guys, if you want to go and read through that, by all means do it. It's absolutely worth your time to better understand the strengths of this technology. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is Matthew Spoke. He is the CEO of the NUCO Foundation, and if you don't know, guys, NUCO is the parent foundation of AION. So it's really important we know that, and I've made some notes based on having watched this small mobile phone-based statement, and he is so smart. It's absolutely worth checking out a few different posts that he makes and some interviews. But basically, the encapsulate from his conversation was the following. He wanted to make it clear that AION is actually, as its strength, is designed to be a router or a core solution in the current blockchain climate. Because at the moment, guys, most of the blockchains work in isolation, and examples of that through the Generation 2 model are things like Ethereum. Despite its capacity to have the applications append to it in terms of smart contracts, it doesn't actually generate interconnections with other blockchains. So this is what this is about. Matt talks about, as some of the strengths, he explains that there are two functionalities at this level. One is having the smart contracts, but also there's interchain applications, meaning that there's logic and transactions that happen between the hub and the other blockchain initiatives or businesses that utilize that, and they can do that, as I said, in a public or a private capacity, which is something very enticing for the public sector, and it's something that affords a serious look at AION as an interoperable blockchain network. So some of the other things, as Matt was saying, one of the strengths is that there's a virtual machine that's built into the AION-1 blockchain, and because of that, it also provides for more scalable and better transactional speeds. It also enfranchises, it also means that underpinning that there's a unique protocol, and that protocol algorithm is known as the proof of intelligence, and with that it is analogous to an updated version of a proof of work. So while some would argue that's not the strengths, they are some of the features, and Matt would be promoting that, so I'll probably want to explain that in this section, and I'll be addressing my concerns later on through the SWOT model. But just a few quick other things that he mentioned is that bridging is a major feature of this, and the bridging protocols are different to the hub AION-1 sort of central component, and what they do in their protocol is they allow for the compatibility between the blockchains that append to it and the hub blockchain itself. So again, guys, if you want to go and check out Matt's talk, by all means jump onto YouTube and you can see the link there. I'll put all the links for everything in the description below. So let's move on. I don't want to sort of spend too much time. I know my videos can be quite long. One of the other strengths, guys, is, as I said before, the fact that there is a unique consensus algorithm. I always like to see that there's been a lot of due diligence done by any company when they are coming up with new and innovative models, and this is one that arguably could be a strength, and we'll look at that further. In terms of press and media attention, there's been a lot afforded to the AION network, so I wanted to broach that with you and just show you some examples. So this came from the Digital Journal, and in that posted just very recently on the September the 3rd, there was clear promotion of AION, and it was stated here as the first network to power communication between blockchains. Some other articles which I'll show you have even gone further, but essentially the idea of showing you these is to simply show you that some of the strengths are that they are actually engaging with the wider media, and they're garnering a lot of support and attention, which is an essential part of building an ecosystem. So in this one, guys, as you can see, they even go further and they title it the Interoperable Blockchain Network. As I said, they're known as IBNs, and AION is announces its advisory board. So in this one, I wanted to highlight some of the features of this post because Anthony DeLorio, who is a very respected figure in the blockchain sphere. He's actually an advisor. He's a key advisor to the AION team. And he's also an Ethereum co-founder, so absolutely worth your time probably paying attention to that connection. And also there's other major players that aren't mentioned here, but you can see, sorry, there are some, and it's worth just getting to know them. I won't mention them all, but another one to know is a man named Alex Tapscott. Alex Tapscott is one of the best and most well-versed speakers of blockchain technology. He's written a book called Blockchain Revolution, and he's also the son of Don Tapscott, who is also an advocate for a lot of the blockchain initiatives happening in Toronto and Canada, which is where this particular business originated. Moving on, guys, another really exciting thing and a strength of AIONs is that there's reports of interconnections between banks and other private sectors as well in relation to developments that are happening on the blockchain itself. So as I said before, guys, the whole point of this new initiative, this interoperable blockchain network design, is so that businesses can append and they can work in a fashion that suits them. So some businesses, for example, like banks, they'll want to work privately. And what this really sophisticated technology does is it allows that facility to happen, arguably. And particularly in a permission context, which is certainly favorable, and it's steeped in the experience, or it correlates with the experience of this team, of the AION team. So exciting news that there's suggestions that big banks and governments are also getting involved, and I'll allude to some other government connections later. Okay, so moving on, some of the other strengths here is the fact that Nuco exists. So as you can see in this title, it says Nuco's Matthew spoke. Today's blockchain don't talk to each other, but they will. So via bridging, as I was talking to you about before, there will be this capacity for this hyperlinkage and interlinkage of different blockchains. But what's important here as a strength is that Nuco, the parent company, it has a direct correlation and a direct connection with a much broader alliance called the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. And as I said before, guys, Matthew Spoke has a lot of experience in the enterprise sector. He used to work for the Deloitte Bank, and he has knowledge of how to write a blockchain protocol. He did that for Deloitte. He has set up this company called Nuco, and one of the strengths is that this Nuco company, despite it being a relatively small startup, has a direct affiliation, has direct representation, and it is considered as one of the launch members of that Ethereum Alliance. That's huge. That's it's beyond huge. So it's a great strength of AION's network as well. So moving on, here are some of the weaknesses I thought I wanted to address as well. This article came from the Huffington Global. The title is Nuco's AION network provides a way to communicate between multiple blockchains. So really it's actually more of a it's more about a multi-channel approach. So if you can imagine this graphic, all these little tiny nodes, or they could actually function as blockchains. So that hyperconnectivity really represents the functionality that I'm trying to explain. That AION one could facilitate via its hub and spoke method. So some of the challenges, or some of the weaknesses rather, are that right now, it's the requisite for this to work is to have a robust ecosystem whereby the public and the private domain effect a mass adoption of this technology. So that's going to be a major challenge. It's going to be currently it is a weakness of the team because they are really just formulating the technology, and they're trying to assert their position from an engineering standpoint. Their team's currently about 20 people, and they're looking to double or triple that in the near future. But at present, their core focus is on that grassroots level of protocol design and implementation. But to be fair, they are also trying to apply that in the real world, which I'll talk about later. So again, that's something to consider as well. In here, the other thing I wanted to mention, guys, is something very important in terms of weakness. I found a good source of it as well. It was on Steemit, and it was posted. I'll better show you the source before I go on. The source came from Nuco Global Incorporated, so who better to go to than the Nuco team themselves. So this is a very veritable source, and here you can see that what essentially the AION 1 protocol is based on, or is a modified proof of work consensus algorithm, as well as a proof of intelligence consensus algorithm. Now, I wanted to address this in the weaknesses area because I have read a lot of it, and I've watched a lot of different videos, read lots of white papers, and it is anomalous, to be honest. The consensus model and the consensus algorithm that represents this company, it needs a lot of unpacking, and the fact that the proof of intelligence is analogous to the proof of work is a huge issue for me. I'd like to know more about how it functions, and I would encourage people to look further into it. But whilst it is a new and innovative one, it's not one in which, in my opinion, adequately compares to the propensity for the other typologies like the Byzantine fault tolerance protocols and the loop chain protocol. Those ones seem to be more advanced, and they tend to be adopted by the Generation 3 model, interoperable blockchain network model. So it's just something to consider, guys. Just my view. In this, I wanted to also talk about some of the major hurdles in terms of, as I said before, guys, trying to convince the private sector. And that's important because, as Matt was explaining, and I'm sure you've heard, trying to get old school, old thinkers and old money to switch into new ways of thinking and new modes of communication is sometimes really challenging, and particularly when they're facing big consortiums like the R3, which is a permission bank consortium. It's a really tough market, and AION have to face that head on, and the inroad that they certainly had was the EEA, or the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. But again, it is one weakness in that they've got a long roadmap and a long way ahead. Now, moving on to some of the opportunities. At the moment, there is a pre-sale happening. It's not on for much longer. I'm certainly not plugging it. I have not jumped into it, but again, I'm not a big fan of ICOs. I like to sometimes wait until later, but I may change my mind, and I sort of want to reserve that right privately. But what I did want to show you is that there is this opportunity. It's designed to provide you with a staking opportunity as well for the first private and pre-sale components, and that, from what I've read, is an opportunity to be part of a 3-year period of staking your tokens. And I know that's very long, so that could be a weakness for some people, but it could also provide for a mode of saving, a method of saving your money, and it is incentivized with monthly growth targets as well. So there is some opportunity there, guys, to know about. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of opportunity is a really great point to discuss, and this came from a post in Reddit by BM35, so thanks, mate, for that. And the question here, the issue was, or the statement rather, was that why this person thinks that AION network is the solution for enterprise and private chains to connect to the Ethereum public network. And this was a huge opportunity, and I agreed. When I was driving home today, I was thinking about the interconnections between two major companies, which I'll talk about right now, and they are the Tendermint company and the Nuco company. Now, we've talked about Nuco. Nuco is the parent company of AION, and although we haven't talked about Tendermint, what they are is they represent a protocol, a very, very good protocol that can actually allow for a complete and robust blockchain ecosystem. So in a sense, with their Byzantine fault tolerance protocol, which is a very good one, they can, in my opinion, they can present themselves, they present a really good competitive edge, or let me be clear, they provide for a protocol that's on par with other current leading interoperable blockchain network protocols. So they are really competitive in the space, and they're really current, and because they're part of that Ethereum Alliance as well, you can go and check out the site and you'll see Tendermint written as one of their launch members. They are going to be potentially going to work really well with Nuco, because Nuco, given that Matt Spoke has a lot of experience in the private sector and he has direct experience with enterprise, essentially the Nuco team could work really well in sync with the Cosmos consortium. And I mention that only because the Nuco team could theoretically apply both a public and a private blockchain structure, which they intend to do within the scope of Cosmos. So guys, definitely check out the Cosmos/Tendermint link. But the other thing to mention, which from this post, some of the other things to mention are that some of the opportunities is that it provides an opportunity for Matt Spoke to go and directly speak with Vitalik. And the reason is that Vitalik is one of the core team members, and he's on the board of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. And whilst he's not necessarily a fan of the enterprise itself, he is certainly a member. So that just means that there's more opportunities for the interaction of these two CEOs, which can only better situate themselves within the Ethereum ecosystem. The other thing to mention is that there is a bit of a dearth of the enterprise component of the entire Ethereum enterprise anyway, and with that, Nuco could potentially be a niche market, and because Nuco is the parent company, it means that AION and its hub blockchain called AION1 could be arguably well positioned for affecting high quality business interactions and enterprise, because essentially there could be an aspect that they represent, which is a permissioned enterprise sort of business model where they can privately and via a closed source method, they can append onto the central Ethereum network. Because remember, as I said before, that the design of AION is to work in sync with Solidity. Sorry, that's a hard one for me. Which is the unique programming language of Ethereum itself. So that was just really interesting, and I thought, but guys, I want to move on to this one. This was a really great academic read. I'm a real nerd when it comes to this stuff, but a huge fan of Marko Vucolic. Mate, if I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry. But I found this paper, and it was the basis for some other really great articles that I read on Medium as well. But essentially, the crux of this, and I'll be really quick, was that Marko Vucolic, he is one of the key designers of the IBM Hyperledger protocol. And the Hyperledger protocol is a DBFT model, and as I said before, guys, when you see BFT, you can guarantee that that's some of the best protocol algorithms of the day, and many of the very best interoperable blockchain networks, they're using some kind of typology of this, and certainly ICON Foundation's doing it. Neo/OnChain is doing that. There's a direct corollary between OnChain in China across to Hyperledger, and they worked directly to try and build the Chinese presence. So there's lots of things going on, but what I wanted to sort of impress upon you is this represents a key threat. So we're moving on to the threats, and the threat here is that the current POW/POI model that AION represents may be problematic, because this article, and as I said, Hyperledger is a major player in the enterprise blockchain sector, and particularly in the consortium realm. When Marko says that POW models are problematic, it's something to pay attention to. So that represents an immediate threat unto the AION ecosystem, or the AION blockchain itself. Something to consider. And guys, if you want an amazing read, go on and check out this guy. He just goes into so much detail as to why the proof of work model here, as you can see, is basically an outdated model. in comparison to these innovative protocols that are coming out now. So moving on, guys, here's another threat, and this one absolutely is ICON. I've talked about it a lot before in a previous video. I've done a review of them. I can't speak more highly of them. In every way, they are building out from the ground up. They are building a very, very robust and comprehensive ecosystem. And whilst that perhaps is a bit of an annoying buzzword, it is, in my opinion, an imperative for an interoperable built blockchain network to function and survive. Because if you haven't got those aspects and those facets of support, all you do have is the tech, and that sole criterion won't get you over the line in terms of real-world application. So ICON, if you want to go and research them, they are smashing it in terms of what they're doing. And if you want to check out some amazing interviews, go and see Lena Kuhn in her interview with Min Kim, who is the CEO of ICON. Now moving on to another threat. Another threat potentially, and this is sort of a question mark, is the Cosmos connection. And I only say that because AION is really focused on establishing a public blockchain component in their infrastructure, and that's reinforced throughout various sources. And Vitalik, in this interview, he's actually talking about Cosmos being potentially integrated into the Ethereum network. Now, as I said, Cosmos is a very very good quality interoperable blockchain network. It's got an excellent protocol, it's got an amazing team, and it ticks a lot of boxes. So, effectively, if if Ethereum's incorporated into that web design, then the sky's the limit with Ethereum in that sense, because essentially the capacity for Ethereum to disrupt further is very strong, and also it's going to really improve Cosmos's I guess, not improve the architecture, but it's going to really bolster the applications, because suddenly then an infinite number of blockchains can be built within the scope and hub, which I imagine will happen in direct support and juxtaposition with Ethereum itself. So that being said, that is the intention of AION. And if you watch their videos, they want to filter through, and they want to work directly through the AION Solidity program. So it could be a bit of a it could be a conundrum in this sense, if they don't sort of articulate exactly how the Cosmos and AION relationship is going to work, because, as I said before, they are both part of that initial membership in the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. So it's really got me thinking. Hope it has for you. Guys, if you want to check out my previous podcast, it goes through a lot of details as to why ICON is such a game changer, and that is yet another threat. Some other things I really want to talk about with you is Hyperledger. Hyperledger is the direct threat. It is the #1 threat to AION and Cosmos, because basically what's happened, guys, is the Linux Foundation has designed an open source protocol, and it's called the Hyperledger Fabric, and it was designed specifically to provide a permissioned protocol for enterprise, and with that in mind, it really challenges AION's role in the Ethereum ecosystem. So it will be interesting to see what evolves from Hyperledger, but certainly it has significant capital behind it, significant businesses, and it's not going to go away. So it's something that we need to know exists, and they're only getting stronger as well as an ecosystem and, I guess, a business enterprise. Okay, now I want to talk to you also a little bit more about the challenges that they're facing, and again, it's about protocol. Tendermint has an excellent BFT protocol, and as I said, they're cutting edge, and they're the ones that tend to be adopted by the current challenges in this market. So with that in mind, again, that's one of the companies that are on the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and given that AION does not have this kind of protocol, it's just something to consider, and it makes me wonder, perhaps, if it's in the interest of the company itself to evolve, just as Ethereum's done. So, to be fair to AION, whilst we are talking about some of the threats, perhaps because it is one unto themselves, if they follow Vitalik's model approach, one of the things they could do is actually reformulate their own protocols to become more current. Okay, some other things. I have read some very comprehensive white papers. One of them was done by a founder of Ethereum. So Dr. Gavin Wood, a very important player, often referenced by Vitalik himself. He designed a very robust heterogeneous multi-chain framework, which is the same sort of thing as the IBN, and it is a very technical white paper. It's been around for a long time, and again, if you guys want to do some more research into that, that's just a major threat slash competitor. And then you've also got OneChain. OneChain is quite impressive. They have asserted themselves to be another game changer in terms of architectural design, framework, facilitative blockchain connectors. So again, it's about that hyperconnection, and they go through and explain it. I will say here that less impressive for me personally because it was a proof of stake model, not the DBFT or some sort of unique protocol. But again, certainly something to look into here. And if you want to see the website, there it is. So guys, let's just rehash, as I said I would do. Let's go through our SWOT analysis and make sure we have clarified a few things so that we better understand AION as the interoperable blockchain network that it is purporting to be. So strengths. One of the first things is that they want to be the very first official third generational router. They want to be the one that interconnects all blockchains in one sophisticated and infinite web. The functionality is to stitch autonomous blockchains in via a unique protocol, which we now know is called the proof of intelligence. It acts as the framework or architecture capable of supporting the blockchain sphere. We're going to see if it does that though later on, but certainly it's one of the strengths of its design. It supports both dApp and interchain applications, so that means that it has a specific bridging protocol, a specific bridging mechanism built into it, as well as its core hub, which services all the transactional value and the scalability potential of the technology. So Nuco is also a member of the EEA. It is absolutely massive. Well done for the team to actually get that far, and obviously that better helps AION's position because they are one of the companies that are housed within the Nuco parent company. Vitalik is also referenced, as we talked about. He attends the EEA. He's part of that. So that can only better improve connections, business communication. This particular technology is designed to work exclusively with Ethereum's Solidity language, which is very important because that just means that it's more favorable to Ethereum for that to happen, because Ethereum would have been looking for a company that was willing to do that so that they could support the enterprise sector, because at present I'll just be really honest and say if they didn't do that, I really believe Ethereum would flounder, it would really suffer, because there is just too many companies coming forward with, with supporting a component of centralization and enterprise backing. It just seems like whilst ideologically we don't want that to happen, and philosophically perhaps we want to have that utopian and decentralized space, we are human beings, and part of unfortunately our nature is the element of greed, and with that comes an element of centrality and centralization. So again, it's great to see that there is that potential for the conversation, at the very least, the protocol conversations happening, and for permissioned protocols to assert themselves in business. Okay, so moving on really quickly. As I was saying, there's a solution to now potentially for the enterprise element of the ecosystem, the Ethereum ecosystem. Matt's had a lot of experience working, as I said, in various positions. He's designed blockchains for banks, so he knows a lot about this particular niche market. He has engaged in conversations with the Canadian government, and I know for a fact, having had some direct communication with the Nuco team, there's absolutely better news coming as well. We don't know what it is, and I don't profess to know, but I can tell you that there is certainly good news coming from the Nuco and AION space. Don and Alex, being Canadians themselves, having this set up a blockchain research centre, and Alex being advisor, it's absolutely massive boon to this company. Anthony Deloria, yet again, as an advisor. There's a unique protocol which is anomalous to me, but could be argued as a boon and a strength. And finally, one of the most relevant things is the application, the application and usage of this technology and of this protocol. Now, right now, there are several companies, major companies, that are discussing the adoption and the usage and contractual agreements with AION. And one of them that's already been established is Moog. And they are a Fortune 1000 company. They're a manufacturing company, and they have already decided to append and use the AION blockchain basically to improve productivity. So overall, guys, the strengths here, there's also really good incentives for those who wish to stake a position in this company via token purchases. Weaknesses, let's get into this SWOT component. So the weaknesses, as I said before, guys, is the POW/POI consensus algorithm model. It's vague. There's too many comments coming from Matt himself saying that it's quite experimentative at the moment, so it doesn't really instill a lot of confidence in someone like me as an investor. When I hear that, I want to know that the algorithm is down pat and that they've done everything to try and they've exhausted all other possibilities. And that's the sort of thing I actually have read from other interoperable networks. Okay, moving on, it's very affronting also in the pre-sale, guys, which is on right now. When you go in and you click on the section that says contribution, I did that just to see what would happen because I haven't personally invested in this. I think it's important for me to be objective. Yeah, it comes up with a very affronting statement that says, if you invest in this, please be aware that we are not responsible should this project not come to fruition, that sort of thing. And I wasn't comfortable with reading that. However, when I raised the issue with the Nuco team, they just explained it's part of their due diligence. So, perhaps it's nothing, but to just, as an investor, when you go and you're putting your dollars forward or your ether forward, can be quite unnerving. The CEO also, one of the other weaknesses is that he claims that the AION one is designed specifically, this is the core blockchain, the hub blockchain of the entire AION system, is designed to run on a public blockchain as well. So that to me represents arguably a weakness, because we know that Ethereum is already a functioning and robust public blockchain. So trying to understand where this will function as another blockchain within that ecosystem needs to be sorted out. So at this stage, I want to consider the public component as a weakness. Also, the CEO, Matt, has repeatedly stated that, as I said before, that this technological endeavor is experimental, and also it's dependent on public and private backing that's yet to be a major force, or there's yet to be major backing, and that's why it's still in the ICO phase. Finally, there's pressure from people from consortiums or from alliances like the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance and Nuco to permissionalize, for want of a better word, or to privatize the AION network. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but certainly there's some of the weaknesses I want to raise. Some of the opportunities, as I've mentioned before through the evidence, there's a possibility that it could be the very first interoperable blockchain network to function in wider society with real-world applications. Personally, I don't think that. Personally, I think that it's going to work alongside some others, because I know of some others that are sort of ahead of the game at the moment. But certainly, it's possible, and it does act as an opportunity. But I do think that AION need to be careful that they advertise themselves as the first, because perhaps it could be an issue if other countries were translating this information. Again, some of the other great opportunities, and this is a massive one. I happen to know a couple of bits of information, guys, with regard to some stuff happening with the Canadian government in Toronto, but there's some really exciting stuff coming in terms of what this company is opening up in terms of government connections and future contractual agreements with Fortune 1000 companies and the like. Moving on, guys, benefits from the well-established, that's meant to be the Ethereum network, because when you've got something like the Ethereum, as you can appreciate, there's a lot of work that's been put into that by Vitalik to get it up and running to the robust and decentralized mechanism that it is. So to be welcomed into that environment is in every way an opportunity to expand upon that. it can work with Cosmos. This could be a really amazing opportunity should they use that and should that be available to them. It all depends on what does happen through the alliance and how everything's sorted out. But if it is possible to become that private/public blockchain facility within the scope of Cosmos and Ethereum, just imagine what this company could do. Okay, so and the other points there just sort of they reference what I was talking about. Let's move across, guys, to threats. Now, as I said, there's some absolute direct and full-on threats when it comes to competitors in the market. So we've got, as number one, in my opinion, is the ICON Foundation. And the reason is, guys, is that they have a thing called the Nexus Core, which is very similar to the AION 1 core of AION. And its function is very similar. It runs through portals. It has communities which function as independent blockchains, and its key address and its catch cry address whenever you see information about ICON is that it's hyper connecting the world. So given that they have a very robust ecosystem already in place, it's absolutely one to be concerned about, and I have no doubt they're watching carefully what's going on. In the Western market, Hyperledger, particularly in Canada and the US, the direct threat is Hyperledger, without a doubt. And when you listen to a lot of interviews, you'll actually hear Matt and others talk about Hyperledger and R3. So it's important that we recognise that they are acutely aware that this is happening. But there is one thing to mention here, guys. Even though I do regard Hyperledger Fabric, which is the protocol that came from IBM, as a direct threat for the AION 1 blockchain protocol and network, Hyperledger don't actually have a tokenized system as such. So, there's only a component of this, an element of threat here. And I probably should have mentioned the token structure as one of the key features and one of the strengths, but we as investors, we like the idea of the tokenization and the utility token structure that naturally grows in value as the ecosystem grows. But in Hyperledger's case, it's the strength, the challenge is that they have such a huge and expansive network of businesses, and it's a permissioned system. So if the preference for AION becomes a permissioned and trusted system, this is going to be a major threat. R3, another threat, perhaps, arguably, I'm not so worried about that. They are specifically geared for finance and banking. OneChain, Arc, and Polkadot, no question that they are threats at different degrees. Go and check out their white papers, go and check out the company, but they are. Now, Neo and OnChain, they are quite an interesting one. They are an absolute threat once you get to know it more, because OnChain and Neo are part of a greater ecosystem. Even though the CEO of Neo, Da Hongfei, will tell you and has told many, they are definitely separate entities. They are not part of the same company. However, there is a thing coming up called NeoX, which is going to function as a cross-chain bridge, and that will allow these two, the private and the public counterparts of this company, to interact. So given that, I think that's particularly interesting because they are also affiliated as a key member of Hyperledger, which again proves that there's a Chinese, a major player that's also decided that Hyperledger is relevant, it's current, it's happening, it's a permissioned consortium, so they've jumped on board. So again, adding to the threat there. Finally, it's important I'll mention Molten first. Molten is a supply chain focused on apparel, but designed to build out via specific chip technology. And what's important to mention here is that they have a thing called a parent and child blockchain structure. So rather than focus on what they're doing, it's the technology that they have that could also rival any of these if they develop their technology. I personally don't think so, but I did want to mention it. And finally, guys, I wanted to say, perhaps first and foremost and last but not least, the protocol is everything from what I've come to learn about interoperable blockchain technologies. And if the protocol isn't sound, isn't advanced, and isn't cutting edge, then everything that underpins it will lag behind. So arguably, one of the things to recognize as a threat is that the majority of the aforementioned companies here, they are really challenging the POW, POI model that that AION represents. So, as I said, the exciting thing is that it's only the beginning for them. They could change their protocols. It could evolve into something new. But right now, I just wanted to present to you the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the AION company. And I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I certainly have enjoyed doing the research as well about AION. And if you want to know more, obviously investigate it, guys. But don't forget to click the bell, because that tells you that other videos are coming up, and also flick us a like, because I don't monetize the videos. I just enjoy communicating with you in this space. Until next time, guys, it's BlockchainBrad signing off. Thank you so much.